Our first ever guest is Erin, or some may know her as Erin Talia. She has served in humanitarian organizations around the world, including China, Russia, Africa, and Israel. She experienced life-changing trauma while she was overseas, and she's here to share her story about how she navigated through this trauma in her healing process. So, Erin, I asked you to choose a quote to start our interview off, and you had chose one or two. And if you would like to read all of them or one of them, you choose. So I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, so one of the quotes that I chose, and by the way, thank you so much. This is going to be a really powerful time together, and I'm honored to be a part of your project that you're doing. And so I just wanted to thank you first. But one of the quotes that really stood out to me with this topic of reinvention after trauma is resilience is accepting your new reality, even if it's less good than the one you had before. You can fight it and you can do nothing but scream about what you've lost, or you can accept it and try to put together something that's good. And that's by Elizabeth Edwards, who has an incredible story of her own, if anyone wants to look that up. And then there's a quote that I coined myself that says, I am not a victim, I am victorious.
That's beautiful, Erin. I love those quotes.
Thank you.
It is so inspiring to hear other stories. And I know that your story will inspire others. And I heard a little bit of your story, which inspired me to have you here today.
Thank you.
So we'll get into your story, and I'll let you guide us through that story and your what trauma you experienced, and I
Yeah.
may often ask questions through that
Yes,
story.
please. Yes. So basically, I had been residing overseas in one of the countries that I was doing humanitarian work in. I had been living in this country for about 3 years, so I was very established there, and I had an apartment, and I was living by myself, and I was just enjoying the work that I was doing. I had friends. I had friends that were like family, and I had it all going on. I was loving life, loving helping others. I felt like I was home. It was a country that I had worked really hard to obtain visas that I could stay in this country and continue to reside there. And that was an accomplishment. So I thought I was going to be there forever. Like I thought this was home. This is where I'm going to stay. And this is where I'm going to do the work that I'm doing. And everything's going to be great. Just the perfect idea of what I wanted to do with my life. And things were going really well. So unfortunately, I actually escaped a very violent attempt on my life that was made outside of my apartment one night. And it required me, due to the nature of the attack and the people that were involved, I had to pack up belongings into a suitcase, one suitcase out of my whole life there. And I had to evacuate the country. I, it was obviously traumatic, but it was also one of those unexpected, just out of nowhere type of traumatic events that you're not prepared for. It's nothing that would have ever been on your radar. And there were violent attempts behind that. So it was very scary. It was horrifying. I thought I was going to die, and I came very close to losing my life in that moment. And I have to be vague in certain regard for names and involvement and all of that. But apart from those those details. It was traumatizing, and I didn't even get to say goodbye to anyone. I left the country and I never went back. Um, it didn't really stop there. The trauma kept, while I was trying to wrap my mind around what had happened to me and how I had escaped, and thank God how I, survived it and was alive. um, I was trying to process all of that, but the same people that made that attempt sent people to follow me while I was back in the States, and they hired private investigators, and they were threatening me in person when I would leave my home. They were making, uh, threatening phone calls and internet, blogs and all of this stuff.
Wow.
It felt like a violation of my privacy on top of the nature of the original attack that was intended to end my life. It was a lot to unpack, because I thought, okay, now that I've escaped the trauma, I'm safe here. I'm back home, in my home country, in a familiar place, surrounded by familiar people. Then maybe I can focus on healing and recovering and processing that. But it followed me here, so it was almost like secondary trauma of dealing with these people in my own, home country. So
How
there were a lot of
scary.
threats.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how scary. And it's a good example of how when trauma happens, that it doesn't stop there, it continues. There's the aftermath. And
Yes.
then you kept experiencing it because it didn't stop there at that first experience.
One of the questions we ask ourselves when we're experiencing something traumatic is, why is this happening? But then when it continues happening, that why question just grows bigger and bigger, because I'm still trying to figure out why that initial attempt happened while they're still
Yes.
following me and continuing to perpetrate that trauma in my life. So it
Yes.
wasn't a trauma that was, there's so many different categories of trauma. It can be a single event, it can be something that reoccurs, it can be an event that lasts more than an hour, it could go into days and months. And in my case, it was just a continuous long event that lasted years after the initial attempt. So yeah, it was
So
trauma to
sorry
the
that
fullest.
happened to you. Yes,
Thank
that's
you. Thank you.
really, really difficult.
Yeah.
Looking back at that moment, was there, do you remember the first realization that you needed to leave?
Yeah, as it was happening. So as I was being physically attacked and that attack was occurring, um, I I knew I have to go. That whatever has caused these people to do what they did is something that I cannot stay and reason with. This isn't something that I can logically go, oh, I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. Can we work this out? Because once that line is crossed and it becomes violent or it becomes a personal attack that is unsafe, right? That threatens your safety, you realize these are unreasonable people. These are people that I can't reason with. So the thought I was having in the midst of this ordeal, which took, I would say it probably took 30 minutes before the police arrived. 30 minutes of just defending
Um,
my life and trying to get these people off of me, and other
it must have,
people coming out of my neighborhood trying to
yeah,
pull them
it
off.
must have felt like a lifetime, 30
It felt
minutes.
like a
So,
lifetime. And so like I can still remember the thought that I had was like, I have to leave. However this turns out, I'm gone. Not because I want to go. And that's something we'll get into, is, kind of reinvention and how to handle things that are out of our control. But I knew I had to go, because these are people that I cannot, be safe around or trust again or risk anything happening like that again.
Yes, absolutely. What was the most unexpected emotion that surfaced in the aftermath of that?
In the aftermath, the most unexpected emotion was, I would probably label it as fear, because nothing looked the same anymore. Nothing was safe anymore for me. And I was afraid. I was very afraid. It's not like what you read about in novels, fictional novels, or a movie where the person that survives is fearless.
Yeah.
It's more realistic as a human to have fear. And so I was afraid. That I didn't think that, being my age, and this happened 17, 18, almost 18 years ago, and I was a lot younger. And so the fear, which had never been a part of my life before, I wasn't fearful. I had been to China. I was doing amazing, kind of crazy things in China as far as humanitarian works go, and then Russia, and it was undercover stuff, and then it was like in Africa. I was doing so many exciting things that were helping in humanitarian ways, that fear wasn't ever anything that registered to me. And so in the aftermath of it, to be afraid was just a brand new emotion to have to deal with.
Yeah. You are set. What I do know from you, Erin, and about you is you're a very kind and gentle soul. I can't imagine, um, someone attacking you or wanting to attack you to this level. Do you think that you being a foreigner in this situation made it easier, or you think that that wasn't a decisive factor?
I think when there's someone that tries to harm you, deciding factors go out the window, because you're already dealing with an extremist mentality that's not rational. And I realized that it it doesn't matter if I'm a kind soul. It doesn't matter if I've spent my whole life helping other people. There are going to be people that hate me. And maybe they hate me for that reason. And so I don't think it mattered who I was, where I was from, how old I am, any of those factors. I think once people have made up their mind to take their contempt that far, there's no other rationality,
Yeah.
to help explain why, or
Yeah.
any of those details, if that makes sense.
I agree with you 100%. There's, yeah, abusers don't have any, what do you, how would you say it? Prejudice to who they abuse. It's just,
Correct. Yes.
yeah.
There's no like logic behind that can reason out the actions. Even if they try to justify it, and if they try to come up with their own, reasons, there's no justification when you're dealing with someone like that.
Yes, I agree. I agree. That sounds really scary and horrific. And how do you feel like trauma has affected your relationships after that, yourself and others?
Oh, it changed everything. It completely changed. I mean, that question alone we could probably spend a few hours on, but I'll try to narrow that down. My relationships with others changed dramatically, because now I was not someone that they understood any longer. I had changed. I was afraid. I was being followed. These things were continuing to occur. So the person that I was kind of morphing into after the trauma was someone different than what people had known me to be before. So honestly, most people just, they took a little step back and then poof, they disappeared. Um,
Yeah.
so it's like kind of like you're tiptoeing away
Mm.
until maybe she doesn't see me anymore. And then, okay, I'm just gonna disappear from this because it's too uncomfortable. These are, you know,
Sounds familiar. Yeah.
yeah, I've not seen her act this way before. Who is she? What's going on? This is a weird situation too. Like depending on the trauma, right? Trauma is icky. Trauma is not something people are drawn to in the sense of wanting to talk about it or understand why things happen. So everyone, for the most part, in my life disappeared. And that was painful, but kind of now that it's been so many years, I understand in a way, and we'll probably talk about more of these topics as we get into this, but um, it is kind of a human behavior, like a response is to just, I don't know what to do. So the best thing for me to do is nothing. And so my relationships just kind of disappeared. I did have a couple people check in on me, but and that's another thing. If I wasn't responding in the way that they wanted me to respond, that really pushed them away. So if I was just being real, yeah, I'm not doing well. I'm going through this and that. They kind of wanted to hear, oh, you're okay. Okay, good. I'm glad you're okay. But I wasn't okay. And I didn't tell them I was okay. So then that made it even more difficult. And then as a result of that, you kind of have this existential crisis of your own, right? Because you're like, okay, all the people that know me are pulling away. How do I deal with myself
What's
by
wrong with
myself?
me? Yeah.
Yeah, what's wrong with me? Like, how do I deal with me by myself? Like, how do I navigate this? So relationships, no matter what trauma you've experienced, it changes your relationships. It changes how you interact even with your own self.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Yeah. I have a theory that I think a lot of that uncomfortableness, people draw themselves away instead of to you
Yeah.
because it makes them face their own uncomfortable trauma when they look at yours.
This is so true.
It's so
That's,
isolating
yeah.
when that happens.
Yeah. That's so true. I mean, if I look at someone and meet them at their trauma, it can mirror back to me my trauma. So that's really hard work to do, and it takes someone who can really be self-aware but also open enough to want to do that with you, and
Yes.
just
Yeah.
not many, if any, really wanted to do that.
Yeah.
So I kind of
It's
by
true.
myself.
Like, I think they have to actually like come to that self-awareness or realization that this is, I'm acting this way out of this because of this way, because of
Yes.
this happened to me.
Yes.
You, one of the, it comes with kindness, coming towards someone that is dealing with something. It's really important to come with kindness and compassion
Yeah.
instead of measuring or reflecting on your own trauma and judgment.
Yeah.
It's really important to come with compassion and love toward that person.
Yeah, I noticed in the relational component, people were also starting to be afraid of me because what had happened to me was so extreme that it's almost like they felt if they associated with me or interacted with me that something what like that might happen to them. It's weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I think we view trauma and PTSD as contagious. Maybe if I, you know, sit with this person in the midst of their messiness, their trauma, they're hashing this out. It's like a dark night of the soul. If I sit with them, maybe I'll end up catching it too. And I've always found that to just be very sad, is that
Yeah.
when someone's going through something or has been through something, you're not going to catch it like a cold. It's not something that's going to transfer onto you. So if we can kind of break that mentality that when someone's going through something or has been through something that they need to be, pushed away, or that they're contagious in their trauma, if we can kind of steer people away from that thinking, imagine how many more doors can be opened toward healing and compassion, and truly being with people in the midst of that
I
and
agree.
helping them heal, because that contagious mentality is what isolated me even further and took me even longer to heal, because I was so alone and I was like, no one wanted to come near me. It took even longer to kind of grapple with that whole issue.
Yes, yes. It's so important what you had just said. I think that that's why I love compassion so much, because it's not, you don't have to necessarily understand, you just hold that space for the other person
Yes. Yeah.
and just allow them to have that space, and how healing it can be for them as well as you, that you taught yourself or you
Yeah.
practice holding that space for that person,
Yes.
and
Yes.
not necessarily having to understand or resonate. There's
Right.
a something I heard recently that I really love and I share with my students, my yoga and dance students, but it's, maybe one's behavior toward you is not necessarily who they are, but what they've experienced.
Yes.
And if you can reflect that on yourself too, um, those that are experiencing a rough time can maybe find compassion or forgiveness for themselves as well. But
Yes, absolutely. That's so, so important. And yeah, beautifully stated for sure.
so, what was the turning point in the recovery process for you?
Well,
Share that with us.
so what kind of transpired after all of that became the PTSD diagnosis, right? So obviously, from that level of, trauma, I started developing classic textbook PTSD symptoms. And um, I'll name some of those so then I can share what the turning point was. But um, it's kind of important to share what those PTSD components are, to then be able to understand, how to work with that and move forward. But I actually experienced reverse culture shock. So in all of my travels and work in other countries, I used to have a way to debrief after I would return home, and it helps prevent what's called reverse culture shock, which is where you have a hard time adapting and reintroducing yourself to your home culture, your home um, environment. And I used to experience a lot of reverse culture shock because, for instance, if I was in Africa, literally in the middle of nowhere, we were building a medical clinic and doing first aid work for a few months for that project. And we had no like plumbing, we had no, the water we weren't even allowed to, we had to use in a limited way because it had like typhoid in it. It was very rough. I mean, we had like one shower a week if we were lucky. It was really, really difficult, but I actually thrived in that environment. So I loved what I was doing so much, and I loved the people, and I loved the work that was being done for others, that when would get home, I would have a really hard time adapting. So for instance, I would go to the store to pick up something I needed, and I would stand in the aisle for like half an hour just looking at all the options. I couldn't process having returned from such an opposite environment. I couldn't really adapt back into my environment. So to make a long story short, not only had I experienced trauma, had to pack up my whole life into a suitcase, didn't get to say goodbye to any of my friends. I'm here back in the States and I have reverse culture shock because I'm like, whoa, I haven't been here in years. Like, okay, I don't have to take public transportation. If I need something, I have to do it this way now. So I had like a reverse culture shock being literally transported from a home that had been established for 3 years back to being here. And I had this inability to kind of adapt back into my environment. So that was like a PTSD symptom. On top of that, I had like physical PTSD symptoms with nightmares. You know, I would wake up with just horrible nightmares every night. I dreaded the thought of going to bed at night. At the same time, I would sleep for prolonged periods. It was like a love-hate relationship with sleep. I knew I needed to rest, but when I would go into the state of rest, the nightmares were just so horrific. Um, I couldn't drive. I was incredibly afraid of being in a car and driving. I had hypervigilance, and some of these I still deal with to a degree today, not as chronically as I did before, but I had a really high sensitivity to noise, which is just the body's like PTSD reaction. Is like makes you jump. I'm a very jumpy person. I try very hard not to be, but if I'm in a restaurant and someone drops, you know, accidentally a dish on the ground, I'm like running for cover as though I'm hiding in a shelter. And my family has been so gracious in that. My husband and my daughter are so understanding that they don't make me feel like a nutcase for like she's crazy, what's wrong with her. No, they understand and they love me through it, and they don't bring it up to make it a bigger deal than it needs to be. It's like, okay, that's her response to noise, we know that, we love her through it, but we're also not going to make it a big deal and be like, oh, you know, why, we noticed you jumped there, are you okay? They kind of like, they have a great way of dealing with it. So I had a lot of these symptoms that are considered like textbook symptoms of PTSD. And then I of course had like the fear and all of that, and just kind of just afraid to go out in public, a lot of these types of symptoms. So back to your question, and what I think you asked, how or what was the turning point?
Yes.
The turning point to starting to heal or
Yes.
realizing,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
the turning point for me was when I realized I am not living my life. The trauma is controlling me. And I was so sick of it. Like, I was so tired of being under the control of the trauma, and it was starting to define me. And I did not like that. So that's different for everyone. It can be days, weeks, months, years, decades. But I do believe that if you experience trauma and you have that PTSD component, there is a time that you feel just completely sick of it being your identity. And that was when things started to turn.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
feel like, and I can relate to that with my own trauma. And it comes and it peels in layers. And
Yes.
sometimes you get re-triggered and you find something new and different about that layer that you didn't know before.
Yes. It's so true. It is like layers, peeling layers off of it. And each layer is something different. Like you said, it's a new discovery
Yeah.
for sure.
It's a really lifelong process because you
It
keep
is.
learning more and more about what happened during that trauma and why is it affecting this moment now, and
Right.
you rediscover something new because every day is new.
Exactly.
And living in that day with trauma, you're discovering something different and how it's
Yes.
affected you.
Yes, truly.
Um, so, what types of things did you do to help you with this healing process?
So, um, basically, I didn't know what to do initially. So it was a lot of exploration. Um, and what I actually started to realize is that I didn't want the trauma to become my identity, like I just had mentioned. So it logically led me in my thought process to reinventing myself as a result. And this conclusion was made, I would like to say, how many months after the actual event? I would say about, I would say almost a year probably after the event was when I had that moment where I need to reinvent myself. Like the reality that I was faced with is that I will never be the person I was before the trauma occurred. And so to me, the first step for that was to grieve, allow myself to grieve the loss of the old Erin, the Erin who didn't live in fear, the Erin that was, thriving and, um, the world was just, full of endless possibilities. And I had to grieve the loss of that version of Erin, and that takes time. And there's still moments of grief, though they are less and less over time. But you have to give yourself permission to grieve and say goodbye and almost part ways with the person you were before, because you will never be that person again. But it doesn't mean that the person you reinvent after the trauma can't be even better than the person you were before the trauma.
Yes, absolutely.
So even though there's grief, it doesn't mean I'm grieving that I'll never be that person. Yes, I'm grieving that, but I also can go into the reinvention as, but this is who I get to be now.
Yeah. I I I like to envision it like a seed and you're planting it.
Yes.
And that seed has a little death to self, and then you rise up into this
Oh,
beautiful blossoming tree.
yes. Yes.
And it takes a lot of vulnerability, okay, with being vulnerable to get to that point.
Yeah.
Because when trauma, you what I noticed with trauma is because you felt so vulnerable during that trauma experience,
Yeah.
you don't want to put yourself in that position of being vulnerable again.
Right.
Like, so it's very difficult to find, there's a lot that goes through to that moment where you decide, okay, I need to surrender a little bit.
Yes. Yes. And surrender is scary, like you said, because after trauma, the last thing you want to do is surrender. You want to kind of put up your guard and
Yes.
protect yourself.
Yes.
And it's the opposite that helps with healing, I think,
Yeah.
as you explained.
Yes. So, that helps our listeners a lot to hear your story and how you got to that point of where you realized you needed to take control and show up for yourself and do something to get past this. Like you said, you didn't want this to be your life. You
Right.
wanted it to find a way to move through it.
Yes. And if I can add, a lot of times after trauma, we sometimes wear a scarlet letter of trauma where we feel shame, or we feel that we are not a part of society and we start to feel rejected. I experienced that, and I started to find myself just making that trauma my identity. And as a result of allowing it to become my identity, I ended up being a victim.
Yeah.
And yes, in the textbook sense, yes, I was a victim of a violent attempt on my life. That is a fact. However, it opened my eyes that it's my choice if I want to live the rest of my life being known as the victim of that attempted, you know, um, violent attempt, or what can I do to not make being a victim my identity. And a lot of times it is easier to just take that victim mentality and go with it, because we think, okay, that's just who I am now. I'm a victim of this. So that's how I introduce myself to the world, or that's how I will present myself. But we actually have that choice. We can choose if we want to be identified by other people through that trauma, or if we want to have our own voice and speak our own truth and say, okay, yes, that happened to me, but that's not all that I am. That trauma is not who I am. It's something that happened to me, but that's not how I identify myself.
What do you think is the hardest part of letting go that victim mindset?
The hardest part is letting go of that mindset requires you to do a lot of work, a lot of vulnerability, like you were mentioning, a lot of rewriting the narrative. So here's an example. How I introduce myself to people will set the tone for how they will treat me. I have seen in family and friends, they will introduce themselves with the opening line of, I am so and so, and this is what I've been through. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that it creates an expectation now for the people that you're talking to treat you within that context. So I realized, hey, wait, I don't have to go around and say, hi, I'm Erin, and I was almost killed one night outside my apartment.
Yeah.
I don't have to disclose that. That is sacred.
Yes.
That is something that not most people can handle or want to hear. And for the record, by the way, you are the first person that I'm publicly talking about this with. I haven't ever shared with anyone in a format like this. And I just want to say that's because you are so compassionate, and you are an amazing, empathetic soul. And so people like you make it safe for those of us with trauma to want to share and feel safe sharing. So that's a side note. But I realized that I can introduce myself and not use my trauma as an identifier. So I started getting involved in art, in dance specifically, and I didn't introduce myself as Erin, the victim of a trauma. In fact, none of them even knew. I didn't share my story with anyone that I started to meet, not because I was ashamed or anything like that, but I didn't want them to know me.
Can I stop you right there?
Yeah,
Because
please.
I really would love to. That's very interesting that you said that, because I have felt that before. So it resonates, that feeling where you feel like you have to introduce yourself with your trauma. And I think that is, and you tell me what you think, but it's kind of like you're damaged goods. So you have to come up front and tell someone,
Yeah.
hey, by the way, I have to be honest with you, I'm damaged.
Exactly. You don't have to do that. You have permission to not have to disclose those sacred moments. Trauma is sacred.
Yeah.
It violates you. It's painful, it's the worst thing you can go through, that's sacred. Not everybody gets access to that. And who you give access to will determine a lot about that relationship and what can follow thereafter. If they're safe, if they're, someone you can trust, great. But we all go through those hard times where we realize not everyone we share with is someone that we can be safe with. So yeah, we don't have to make the trauma our identity, and we don't have to wear that scarlet letter. Hi, I'm Erin. I'm ashamed, but this is what happened to me.
Yeah.
You don't have to be that. Now you might feel that inside. It takes practice, right? Like I'm not saying that confidence just hits you overnight and everywhere you go, you just exude confidence. But if you start small and say, you know what, I have introduced myself a lot of the time with my trauma stepping out before me, maybe start practicing when you meet someone new, when you're in a new environment, when you're at a new activity or event, try to withhold that as a source of introduction and shame and all of those things that it can kind of bring up.
Well, thank you for giving us that permission to not.
Yes, full permission.
What does victory over trauma look like for you today?
Victory over trauma is not denying that the trauma existed. It's not being fake or putting on a happy face when I feel sad. Victory over trauma to me is saying, I'm still on this journey and I'm still working through it. No matter what that could look like from day to day, like you had mentioned earlier, it shifts, it changes, it moves. Being victorious over trauma is not allowing it to define me. I get to define me. Nobody else gets to define me but myself. That is my right. So taking that power back and sharing those details with the people that I feel comfortable with and withholding them from the people I don't feel comfortable with is me being victorious over that. Me also going through steps of healing, from physical activity to the arts to writing and journaling, whatever it may be for you, to helping others, to there's so many different modalities of healing and helping process and work through PTSD. That victory isn't when PTSD disappears, because it doesn't disappear. So if we're looking at having victory over trauma as I have victory when it's gone, then we'll never feel victorious because it's always there, right? You can't be who you were before. We can't change what happened, but we can keep going on this journey with the idea that I'm reinventing myself as a result of this trauma, and I get to be in charge and navigate that path.
Yes, I love that. It's as if you're building on top of what that was, that form of health.
And I call that rebuilding the ruins, right?
I love that.
Because if you've seen these ancient towns in different parts of the world, these ancient cities, and they a lot of times new on top of the ruins of the old one. Yeah. So they don't just stay in ruin. You can build slowly on top of what happened. Even if you feel like your life is in ruins, you can rebuild and build something beautiful and amazing. Not perfect. We're never perfect, and no expectation, but real, just genuine, authentic.
Yes. I think it's a practice, a daily practice.
Definitely.
And realizing that you might stumble sometimes and you might need to take a step back, but it's a practice to have that victory over trauma.
It is. It truly is a practice. Yeah.
What role did community play in the healing process, or the lack of it?
Both. I would say there was a lack of this. So there's a lack of community, kind of like when I mentioned at the beginning, where people just kind of withdraw from you. I did not feel there was community for me. I was kind of an anomaly overnight. No one really knew what to do. There wasn't really a community. However, I will say that even in the past 18 years since that's happened, oh my goodness, almost 20 years, mind blowing. There have been so many different studies and research and opportunities and different things that people that are studying psychology or studying PTSD have to offer that weren't there even just 20 years ago. So your community at first may feel non-existent or awkward or small. Maybe the community just feels like, I don't know what to do with this person. But at the same time, there are other things that are out there that weren't there, decades ago. There are trauma recovery groups. There's a lot of resources online that we didn't have then, where if you're not comfortable in person, you can kind of be in the safety of your own home, and you can talk in these forums. There are things, groundbreaking studies and things like EMDR, which I did participate in. It was kind of a new thing then. Eye movement desensitization rehabilitation, where it's a practice, and you can kind of Google this to get all of the information if you're listening in right now. But it's a practice where it takes the trauma that's pretty much lodged in a part of your brain that has it on repeat, 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 repeat. And it helps you dislodge the trauma from that part of the brain so that the trauma can be processed and let go. It has amazing success rates. Some people say after one session, they're good to go. Some people after a few, some people a little longer. But this is just a groundbreaking discovery. And so there's a lot of resources and practices, like you were saying, and groups now that do make you feel like you're in a community. And I kind of feel like I was at the beginning part of that. So I had a little bit more resources to work with, like with the EMDR, than people before me had years before that. But now, fast forward to today, there's a lot more out there that can help you feel like you're a part of a community and not completely alone.
Yeah, there seems to be so many resources for that. And I think just tapping into it, finding those resources.
And what you're doing is also very important with that, with your energy work,
Yes. Oh, yeah. Energy work. And when you were mentioning the EMDR, it's kind of like that. It's a
Yeah.
type of energy work. So I have a two-part question for you.
Okay.
Okay. What role did dance play in your reinvention, and how can people use creativity and self-expression to start a new chapter in their lives?
Okay, so now we get to introduce Talia.
Yeah.
All right, so I found shortly after I returned to the States, I was looking for anything and everything out there. I'm like, maybe I'll paint, maybe I'll do taekwondo, maybe I'll start these lessons. I was all over the place. And I'm like, there's got to be something I can do to just get me to not think about my trauma all of the time, because it becomes obsessive, compulsive. It's just a nonstop thought process, and I had to break it. And so I was looking, in the community, what is there to offer? And I discovered dance, in particular belly dance, which appealed to me because it's the music of the culture that I had been living in. So it was kind of like a piece of home for me. So I took a class. I instantly fell in love with it. And I ended up dancing to this day for the past 17, 18 years now. And through that, I got a new name. So part of the reinvention, after the trauma and the healing component of getting involved in the arts and dance, is that specifically in this dance form, you can take on a name which kind of acts as your persona of who you are as a dancer. And I put a lot of thought into my name, and I wanted something that resonated with me. And so after training and being mentored and having wonderful just dance sisters in the community, I took the name Talia, which is ironic because almost everyone now knows me as Talia more than they know me as Erin. But I kind of like that because it shows that you can create something new, like we were talking about. And when I am Talia in dance, in art, in performing, I'm not the victim, the Erin that I was because of the trauma. It's kind of like me saying, this is who I am now. I'm victorious. This is how I process my trauma through dance. I felt after what happened that I lost my voice. I almost even physically lost my voice. My voice became very weak. It became I couldn't communicate. I couldn't speak and share. So dance became my voice. And I processed a lot of my trauma and the things I was going through dance. I felt it could speak for me what I couldn't, physically say and use words to describe. So that was the most key component in my healing journey with PTSD, is becoming Talia, if you will, becoming this woman that had been through all of this, but was learning to speak again in a new way.
Yes.
Thus reinventing myself.
Yes. That's beautiful.
And then and then I have to put a side note in. Then I experienced more trauma. I became a single mom. I went through, a really awful divorce, in that the things that, had led to that, so that was a real shocker for me. So just because you overcome trauma, unfortunately, there's no guarantee in life that you won't go through trauma again. And I think we have to be realistic about that as well, because then when I went through what I call the secondary trauma of divorce and becoming a single mom overnight, and the whole life that I had built with this person that I found out was a complete lie in every way, the abuse, all of that, I had to do it again. I found some of those symptoms popping back up again, and I'm like, oh, here we are. I can either lay down and just accept it, or I can reinvent again. Who do I want to be? This is the mom that I want to be to my daughter while we're going through this unexpected tragedy in our family. What can I do now that I have a little one looking at me? Do I show her and model for her how to be a strong woman and work through my trauma, or do I be a victim again? And I'm happy and grateful more than anything that, as hard as each trauma was, I chose not to be a victim. I don't want anyone to look back on my life and be like, oh, what a sad story she was.
Yeah.
What a sad girl. No, I want them to see that I'm strong. I'm not going to be bullied into anything. Like, I speak for me. That is my right. And I'm going to reinvent me again. And I'm sure, because it's all, unexpected. Maybe there'll be more trauma. It could be tomorrow, could be tonight, could be 20 years from now, or maybe not. Maybe not. But we have to go into it knowing it's not one and done. There could be other traumas that exist in your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is very well said, and so true, and realistic.
Yeah.
Every day there's a change, or there wouldn't be any change.
Yes, very true.
You have to live with those new changes.
Yes.
Nothing stays consistent.
Yes.
So if someone was beginning their journey and feels overwhelmed, what is the first thing they should do?
If they're feeling overwhelmed, I would say, to me, if you're feeling overwhelmed, it's a sign that you need to let yourself grieve. Let yourself feel what you're feeling. Don't don't block it. Don't stuff it deep down inside. Don't fake it. If you if you're in that spot and you're struggling, allow yourself to grieve. And grieving looks different for all of us. It could be crying in those messy, dark moments of feeling hopeless. Sorry for tearing up.
That's okay.
The first step toward that healing journey is the grief. Express your grief in in crying, in if you have to sleep, sleep, and you need rest. If you have to eat, eat, nourish your body. Grief in going for long drives and listening to therapeutic music that speaks to your soul, reading a story or an author or something that makes you feel like you're relating to. There's so many different ways to grieve, probably unlimited ways to grieve. You can grieve watching a beautiful sunset. You can grieve, sitting in a dark corner. Whatever you're going through,
Take your time.
and whatever step you think is needed to propel you to the next part of your journey, allow yourself to grieve that loss.
Yes, and very well said. Beautifully said. So when you mentioned, when we talked about dance, it's something movement. Why I love teaching dance and dancing and teaching yoga. They're both serve different purposes. But dance is so healing because there's no words involved. It is just you and your body. And you're using every bit of your body to express something. There's no barrier of language.
Yes.
And it's so healing when you feel someone connect to that expression,
Yes.
physical expression, is really healing. It's
It is.
a great, besides just the performance part, or maybe in a classroom setting where you're able to express some improv moments where you
Yes.
get to express what you're feeling inside. And then yoga, breath to movement, being mindful, being present. I think a lot of our trauma takes us back there to that trauma. So we're going back into the past and not being present. And being present, there's such beautiful things we can experience being present. New friendships,
Yes.
new conversations,
Yes.
just being able to appreciate the moment, the
Yes.
moment outside, the comfortable chair you're sitting in,
Yes.
whatever it might be, those small details that are such a blessing to be in this moment.
Yes.
So I also want to add that to creative expression, and yoga has been really helpful for me.
Yes, the body traps trauma. Trauma can be stored not just in your memory, but in your muscle memory. And so one of the most powerful things you can do, and one of the most healing things you can do, is movement. There is power in movement, and it can unlock trauma that the body's holding on to. As with your energy work and the yoga and all of that, firsthand how powerful that is. So that's another step for someone who's listening, can be like, okay, I've grieved already. I'm tired of grieving. What do I do now? Move.
Yes.
Find that movement as a form of expression and healing and unlocking. It really does unlock that trauma for you.
And you're right, the energy work, and that's as something else you can do when you're finding that healing process. Energy work that I do is releasing trapped emotions.
Yes.
And there's so many different types of energy work. More commonly people have heard of Reiki.
Yes.
There's so many different kinds, and they do make a difference. And EMDR, maybe talk therapy isn't your thing and you want to try something different. Finding movement.
Yeah.
Like you said, helping to release that trauma, and dance, yoga, working out, anything physical. I know you do Pilates. So
yes.
I'm sure that's part of that process for you as well.
Yes. Yes, it is. There's so many practices, so many physical activities that you can do that are healing modalities for sure. For sure.
Well, I would like to have a closing question for you.
Okay.
For those listening, what do you want to leave listeners who feel trapped in their trauma?
If you feel trapped in your trauma, even though you feel alone, you're not alone. There are countless people, and everyone to a degree experiences trauma, not to take away from the personal impact of yours, but allow yourself to feel what you feel. Give yourself permission. Allow yourself to go through that dark night of the soul, they call it, where it's messy. You question yourself, you question others, you question your beliefs, you question all of these things. But I don't know if you've heard this quote, and I might be getting the wording of it wrong, but I've heard it said before: when you're going through hell, don't stop. Don't set up camp there. You have to keep going through it, even if you don't know what going through it even means. But it's honoring your emotions, honoring your feelings, doing that messy work of healing and just being. There's so many different things that we laid out today of how you can, different modalities of healing and different things you can do and different steps you can take. But if you're in the middle of that dark night of the soul, allow yourself to be there, and don't put unnecessary expectations on yourself or on others, because other people will fail you. Don't put it on them to heal you. You will heal as you process and as you're real, as you're genuine, as you're authentic with your emotions, as you're authentic with the betrayal you feel from what happened, with all the emotions that come up, the fear, the distrust, the betrayal, whatever the abuse, whatever the context of that trauma is. Allow yourself to feel it, to honor it, and keep going through hell so that you can come out of it. And there is a future, there is a reinvention for you, and it will happen. Just don't stop where you're at. Don't give up. Don't stay there. Don't set up camp. Keep pushing through.
Bravo. Very well said. Beautiful, Erin. I'm so happy that you are my first interview.
I'm honored.
Yes, this podcast is to help people navigate through trauma by hearing other stories.
Thank you.
Resilience.
Thank you for
it's a very special one.
Thank you for creating a safe place for me to share my story for the first time publicly. Thank you. That you mean so much to me. I hope you know that, and I'm very honored to be a part of this, and I hope many people can relate and find even an ounce of hope or healing.
Well, I have a feeling that this is not going to be your last time on this podcast. So.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And to everyone listening, I hope that you found some good inspiration
Yes. Yes.
to get to the next phase of your healing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.